In a quiet warehouse in rural Quebec, thieves pulled off a crime so strange that it sounds fictional. They stole maple syrup worth more than 18 million Canadian dollars. The scheme remained hidden for months. It was discovered only when one heavy barrel moved far too easily beneath an inspector's hand. When the lid came off, there was no amber syrup inside. Some barrels were empty. Others had been filled with water. And this was not a missing case or two. The contents of 9,571 barrels had been taken from one of the most important maple syrup stockpiles on Earth. To understand why anyone would risk years in prison for pancake syrup, you first have to understand what maple syrup means in Quebec. Quebec produces roughly 3/4 of the world's maple syrup. A bad season there can affect supplies and prices far beyond Canada. The harvest depends on a narrow rhythm. Freezing nights, warmer days, and sap rising through millions of trees. Nature decides how much syrup exists each year. To smooth out those wild swings, Quebec's producer organization created a strategic reserve. In strong years, surplus syrup goes into storage. In weak years, stock is released. It functions almost like a central bank for maple syrup, not a government vault, but a producer-run system built to stabilize supply and support the market. But in 2011, part of that valuable inventory sat in a rented warehouse with a weakness no one seemed to take seriously. Security was minimal. The same system that stabilized prices also created resentment. Production quotas and strict marketing rules made some producers feel protected, and others feel trapped. Wherever a valuable product is tightly controlled, a black market can grow around it. Quebec maple syrup was no exception. Richard Vallières knew that underground world well. He understood the product, the buyers, the routes, and the anger surrounding the rules. Years earlier, he had been hit with a massive penalty for illegal syrup sales. He later said revenge against the Federation was part of his motive. Then came the opportunity. Avik Karen had access to the warehouse property and knew the building, its routines, and its almost non-existent defenses. Inside were thousands of barrels, each weighing hundreds of kilograms and holding a commodity that could be resold almost like cash. They did not plan a dramatic nighttime raid. Their advantage was patience. If they looked like legitimate tenants, they could move slowly and disappear into routine. The group rented space on the same property. That gave them a believable reason to enter, leave, load equipment, and drive trucks through the gates. Beginning in late 2011, barrels started leaving the reserve. Drivers, handlers, and syrup workers each performed one small part of a much larger operation. The stolen barrels were taken to a remote sugar shack, where pumps and hoses transferred the syrup into other containers for resale. At first, the crew tried to preserve the illusion. After draining the syrup, they refilled barrels with water so the weight would not expose the theft. The barrels were resealed and returned to their original stacks. From the floor, nothing looked different. Every successful trip made the operation bolder. Eventually, some barrels were simply drained and returned empty. Speed replaced caution. Selling the syrup inside Quebec would attract attention, so the network moved it through other provinces and across the U.S. border. The stolen syrup was broken into smaller lots and sold into legitimate channels. Many buyers had no idea the product came from a crime. For nearly 10 months, syrup worth millions left a warehouse that still appeared full. The crime hid behind repetition, trust, and the fact that no one looked inside. By the end, nearly 3,000 tons of syrup had vanished. Its market value was about 18.7 million Canadian dollars. Vallières later said the syrup sold for about $10 million. After transport costs and payments to accomplices, he claimed his personal profit was around $1 million. Then, in July 2012, the routine that had protected the thieves became the routine that exposed them. Inspector Michel Gavreau arrived for the annual inventory. To count the barrels, Michel climbed high above the floor. He reached for support, and the barrel under his hand shifted. A full barrel should have weighed more than 600 pounds. This one felt almost hollow. He climbed down, opened it, and found nothing. Then he checked another, and another. Some barrels looked full and felt heavy. But when the lids came off, they held clear water instead of thick amber syrup. The quiet inventory became an emergency. Workers spread through the aisles, opening, weighing, and checking barrel after barrel. Dozens became hundreds. Hundreds became thousands. The deeper they checked, the more impossible the loss became. The reserve had held tens of millions of dollars in product, yet the temporary warehouse had no serious surveillance system and relied on limited checks. Quebec police launched a huge investigation that crossed provincial and international borders. The trail ran through warehouses, sugar shacks, transport companies, and buyers. Unlike cash, thousands of tons of syrup are difficult to hide. Every truck, pump, storage tank, and sale created another possible link. Searches uncovered equipment, vehicles, and some of the stolen syrup. But much of it had already entered the legal market and could never be separated from ordinary supply. Richard Vallières was convicted of theft, fraud, and trafficking in stolen property. The crime that had looked effortless now carried years of consequences. He received an 8-year prison sentence. But the biggest legal battle was still about the money. The trial judge imposed a fine of more than $9 million, based not on his personal profit, but on the value of stolen property he had controlled and could not return. An appeal court reduced the amount to roughly his claimed profit. But in 2022, Canada's Supreme Court restored the larger fine. The court's message was simple. A thief cannot limit the cost of the crime to the money he personally kept. The warehouse system changed. Security, surveillance, access control, and inventory checks became far more serious. The heist was not powered by futuristic technology. It succeeded because valuable goods were hidden inside ordinary routines, and because trust went untested for too long. It was a story about market power, resentment, opportunity, patience, and one astonishing security failure, all wrapped inside something Canadians pour on breakfast. And that is how thousands of barrels vanished in plain sight, turning Quebec's liquid gold into the center of one of the strangest and most valuable thefts in Canadian history.